thank my colleague from West Virginia, Senator Capito, for clearly laying out her concerns with this COVID package. I think about where we were a year ago. We were right here in this chamber. It was March of 2020. As we were debating, working together in a bipartisan fashion to come up with a major, over $2 trillion COVID relief package. In fact, if you look back over the course of the last 12 months, Congress passed five bipartisan COVID-19 relief packages. 5 of them. And during that time, as we know, the Republicans were in the majority in the Senate. And we believed it was very important. We're dealing with COVID challenges in our country that we came together in a bipartisan way to address this horrible pandemic. It didn't stop us from working with our colleagues across the aisle to reach a compromise in order to get needed relief for Montanans and the American people who were struggling because of the pandemic. Bipartisanship, it takes work. It takes both sides coming together. It takes a little more time as well. But for the good of Montanans and for the good of the American people, they expect that of us here in the United States Senate. Unfortunately, what we're witnessing today is bipartisanship is no longer in the vocabulary of President Biden and the Democrats. They've taken this bipartisan process that we have had over the course of the last 12 months, and they've taken it hostage. It's become their way or the highway. Take it or leave it. They're trying to jam through a hyper-partisan, not a bipartisan, but a hyper-partisan $1.9 trillion COVID-19 package. We shouldn't even call this a COVID-19 relief package, and here's why. 90% of what's in it has nothing to do with the core health needs of combating COVID-19. Nothing. This nearly $2 trillion package is nothing more than a Pelosi payoff, a liberal wish list that gives President Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and Chuck Schumer billions of dollars for these partisan pet projects. This COVID-19 relief package includes a laundry list of liberal priorities. Now, I'm not making this up. What I'm about to share was actually included in the most recently passed package of this COVID legislation out of the United States House, which, by the way, it passed in the wee hours of the morning this past weekend on Saturday when the American people were asleep, and it was not supported by a single Republican member. By the way, contrast that to where we were a year ago. We passed a huge COVID package here in the United States Senate, 96-0. You can't get any more bipartisan than that. And yet, when they jammed this package in the House Saturday morning, not a single Republican supported. In fact, a couple Democrats opposed it. Here's what's in that so-called relief package for COVID-19. $100 million for Nancy Pelosi's Train to Nowhere. It's a Silicon Valley underground rail project to help big tech. You tell me what that has to do with COVID-19. $350 billion to bail out blue states that had financial problems before the pandemic. Now, Montana should not be footing the bill to bail out states like New York, California, Illinois, especially when we've seen reports that states are actually doing much better than projected when you look at revenues coming in 2020. In fact, listen to this, California is projecting a $25 billion surplus in 2020. There's $50 million in this package for climate justice. There's millions in bailouts for Planned Parenthood. It also makes Planned Parenthood eligible for taxpayer dollars through the Paycheck Protection Program. Now, there's $130 billion in there for schools. Now, hear this. 95% of it won't be spent this year. In fact, 95% of it is spent in years 22 through 28. You tell me what that has to do with this immediate rush to have to get this package passed when most of the spending is in the years out to 2028 even. This is ironic, as President Biden and the Democrats are bowing to political pressure from the teachers' unions to keep kids out of the classroom. I cannot tell you how many parents we're hearing from that want to see the schools opened up, want to see the kids back in school, back in the classroom. They support opening the southern border for illegal immigrants over opening schools for American students. As I've laid out, President Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and Chuck Schumer's COVID-19 package is not about COVID-19 relief at all. In fact, the White House Chief of Staff, Ron Klain, said this, and I quote, "This is the most progressive domestic legislation in a generation," end quote. I believe that. This is all about political favors for the Democrats. It's about cashing in on campaign promises, and it's outrageous. While the Democrats are trying to further their liberal agenda under the guise of passing COVID-19 relief, we are sitting on $1 trillion of unspent, already allocated COVID-19 relief dollars from the prior 5 packages. In fact, the last package we passed in December, $900 billion, only about 50% of that allocated dollars is out the door. So shoveling almost $2 trillion. Now, how much is $2 trillion? The entire annual federal discretionary budget for the U.S. government is about $1.4 trillion, the entire discretionary budget. The Democrats want to push another $2 trillion into this economy that is poised to rebound as businesses reopen. It's deeply irresponsible. It will needlessly cause our debt to soar to new heights and could harm our economic recovery by sparking inflation. And its partisanship is exceeded only by its recklessness. Mr. President, the American comeback is well underway. Our economy is rebounding. GDP is expected to grow 10% by the end of the first quarter. Personal saving rates are way up, 20.5% this past January, compared to 7.6% in pre-pandemic January of 2020. Manufacturing is at its highest growth level since August of 2018. Vaccines, they're being distributed. Hospitalizations are going down. In fact, hospitalizations are down nearly 20% this week versus last week, looking across the country. In fact, more than 40% of those over the age of 65 are vaccinated with at least 1 dose. That's good news. And on vaccines, I want to recognize our governor back home in Montana, Governor Greg Gianforte, for his outstanding leadership on getting vaccines distributed across Montana. I also want to thank Montana's healthcare heroes for their dedication to getting the vaccines out and keeping our communities and our families safe. In fact, just last week, Montana was recognized as the most efficient state in the nation, #1 out of 50, for administering vaccines received by the federal government. But in Montana, we're in need of more vaccines. That's why I've joined forces with the governor and the Congressman Rosendale requesting them from President Biden. I am pleased to see that it was announced just this week that Montana will be receiving over 8,000 doses of the J&J vaccine in the coming days. Vaccines, vaccine distribution are what we should be focusing on now. They are what will help us get life back to normal. They are what will end this pandemic. Yet sadly, only 1% of Biden and Pelosi's COVID-19 package goes to vaccines. That's unacceptable. It's unacceptable that the partisan Pelosi-Schumer bill lacks foresight and badly misdiagnoses what America needs now, because we are seeing the light at the end of this tunnel. We must keep moving in this direction. Any future relief must be targeted and focused on vaccine distribution. Let's just start by retargeting the $1 trillion that's not even yet out the door. Why don't we start there? But instead, the Democrats are choosing to go their own way in a purely partisan piece of legislation to spend another $1.9 trillion, most of which does not address anything related to the COVID-19 pandemic. It must be directed instead towards ending the pandemic, helping the American people, not supporting the liberal dreams of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. I yield back my time.